Legend has it that dumplings were first developed in China more than 1,800 years ago by a master physician who sought a way to warm up frostbitten villagers. As much of the U.S. and Canada emerges from a particularly long winter, Pixar aims to warm audiences' hearts with a similar tactic, courtesy of their much buzzed-about new short film, Bao. The film tells the story of an empty-nesting Chinese mother in Toronto who finds a new purpose when one of her homemade dumplings comes to life. It's the first of Pixar's 20 shorts to be directed by a woman, which is especially significant given the company's notorious boys' club reputation in the male-dominated animation industry as a whole. The short, at nearly 8 minutes, the longest one to date, will premiere at the Tribeca Film Festival this week before its wide release this summer, when it will screen ahead of the much-anticipated The Incredibles 2. Bao's maker is 28-year-old director Domee Shi. Born in China and raised in Toronto, she grew up an avid fan of anime and manga. Upon graduating from nearby Sheridan College's renowned animation program in 2011, she interned with Pixar and was hired by the company the same year. She worked on films like Inside Out, The Good Dinosaur, and Toy Story 4 as a storyboard artist, generating images that illustrate the scripts and operate as a rough draft of a film. She began combining the ingredients for Bao in 2014 as a side project, inspired by classic fairy tales, and her own life growing up as an only child. "I wanted to use this dumpling as this vessel to tell this parent-child story," she told Vogue. "This image popped into my head of this mom nuzzling her little baby dumpling to death, and I had to draw it down. Disturbing, perhaps, but not a sentiment completely unfamiliar to mothers and children alike. My mother would hold me close and be like, 'I wish I could put you back in my stomach so I knew exactly where you were at all times,' she says. I wanted to play with that idea of loving something so much that you never want to let it go, anywhere. Even outside your body." Such unsettling ideas may not sound like typical Pixar fare, which has tended towards more traditional, if occasionally absurdist, subjects of affection, sentient toys, cars, cuddly beasts, but she found Pixar's top brass to be surprisingly receptive to her idea. "I had no idea that they would be interested in telling a story this weird and kinda dark," she remembers. "But I pitched it to Pete Docter, a nearly 30-year veteran of the company and the director of Monsters, Inc., Up, and Inside Out, and he loved the ending, which, not to spoil anything, confirms that nothing can stay cute and small forever. Docter said, 'You should keep that in there.' And while many classic children's stories and fairy tales have long featured less than sunny undertones, see Sleeping Beauty, Snow White, or Bambi, for starters, ultimately Bao is a tale of food and family and how the two meld, creating potent emotional resonances." She spoke with Vogue about the unsung toil of dumpling making, both in the kitchen and in the animation studio, and what happened when her mom put maple syrup in her dumplings, among other topics. "Your mom consulted on the dumpling making for the film. Does she have a particular specialty?" "She usually makes the classic half-moon-shaped, Beijing-style boiled dumpling. But she's a really creative immigrant woman, so through time she's developed her own recipes and dumpling shapes. She makes a really good vegetarian one with egg and chives and rice noodles. She's very experimental. Sometimes she'll put maple syrup in them because we are Canadian, for a little sweetness. You know how you put sugar in barbecue sauce or a meat dish? It actually tasted pretty good." "Did you start to look at dumplings differently?" "I realized I took them for granted growing up because I'd eat them in a second, and I didn't realize how much labor was involved. When we brought her to Pixar to do a couple dumpling making classes, she'd show you every single step. She makes the dough from scratch, the filling from scratch. She's really old school in that she won't use a meat grinder for the pork filling. She insists on chopping it by hand with a knife because she says it tastes better. She won't use a food processor. All she has is a cleaver, and she just minces the meat for 10 minutes. She throws in the chives, and it's just like 10 to 20 minutes of pure elbow grease, just chopping and chopping. I tried to show off to my crew, but after 10 seconds, I was like, this is so hard, I can't do it." Now I definitely appreciate all the work and love that goes into her dumplings. I read that it's a challenge to portray food in animation. What makes that so difficult? It ended up looking so good, but it was super challenging for the FX artists. In real life, too, getting raw pork to look good is tricky. It's the same principles as food photography. We have to exaggerate and emphasize stuff that isn't there in real life. We had up the saturation of the colors, we had to add in bigger chunks of carrots and onions. It was hard for the FX artists to get the physics of the fillings and that consistency right. If it's too watery, it looks like a weird paste, or like hummus. And there's a lot of complicated stuff happening in that shot where she's folding the dumpling, the filling has to collide with the wrapper, and her fingers are pinching the wrappers together. It all has to look good. There's a real tactile, organic quality to the animation. How did you develop that? I gave the animators tons of references of really cartoony Japanese animation that I love. I love how pushed their expressions are. We really wanted to honor the fact that dumpling is made of dough, so he's squishy and organic already. His mouth can go really big or small, and his limbs can stretch out, and he's bouncy. We wanted to highlight those aspects of his material with the animation. Squishy and round and simple were principles we applied throughout to the human characters, the world, the set design. Everything is thick and low to ground. All the produce in the Chinatown shots were oversized. There's 4 apples in a box. Every edge is not completely straight. We wanted there to be this perfect imperfection in the world to feel more handmade and personal and warm. As a Chinese American, I noticed so many details that were so true to the world of Chinese American homes or Chinatown bakeries or groceries. How did you introduce your team to the Chinese Canadian world? I assume many were not familiar with it. Our artist Rona Lu led the charge when it came to design, art, and look of Bao. She's Chinese American, and we both drew heavily from our own personal lives. We took photos of our parents' houses, we went on research trips to San Francisco and Oakland Chinatown, lots of dim sum and Chinese restaurants. We forced the crew to go to Chinatown. We told them where to eat and shop. We wanted to make sure that the design and the feeling of the world felt authentic, like our own lives. That huge elaborate meal, in the film, it's basically all of my favorite dishes that my parents would make. I'm from Changqing, close to Sichuan province, and that's where spicy food is from, like mapo tofu. For good Sichuan food, we would go to Spices 3 in Oakland. We got mild or medium spicy because most of the crew couldn't handle it. Laughs. Have you always been interested in portraying diverse characters? Because I'm a Chinese artist and I've been exposed to a lot of different art and animation and film growing up, and I've lived in Chinese immigrant communities, it just comes naturally to me. It's the stories and characters I want to talk about. Coming into the industry, I felt a lack of that. The genesis of Bao was me wanting to draw these characters and see them move and be on screen. With Coco and now your film, are multicultural stories the direction Pixar is moving towards? Is this a conscious effort? I think Bao is definitely an example of Pixar embracing stories from diverse backgrounds. They've realized that diverse points of view and stories are an asset. That's where the new ideas are, where you'll see stuff that people haven't seen before. I hope I'm the beginning of a trend. Do you learn anything new about your mom during the process? I definitely understand her a little better. The mom character is the main character, so I had to put myself in her point of view. I was definitely more the dumpling for a long period of my life, where I was like, I just want to be free, I feel so suffocated. I couldn't wait to move away. Making the short, I feel more empathy towards parents who experience empty nest syndrome. Your whole life is raising this kid, and they're your everything, and then they're gone. I definitely feel more of that Chinese daughter guilt now. Laughs. They haven't seen Bao yet, but mom has seen an early version. Her one note was, if you're gonna make the main character me, make sure she's beautiful. And I was like, yes mom. She will be beautiful.